My name's Giles Bondsmith, and I think some of you may have heard me just talking next door about gram-negative sepsis. For those of you that didn't, I am a consultant surgeon. I specialise in liver and pancreatic disease, as well as acute general surgery. I'd just like to say a big thank you for letting me have the opportunity to come and talk. For those of you that have sort of heard me talk a few times, my number one passion, and for what I'm most known for, is actually not gram-negative sepsis. I know, shock, horror. It's actually about surgical site infection reduction strategies, and I've spent the last 10, 15 years really trying to get under the hood and work out how the hell we can get rid of this. Because at the end of the day, that is not a great result. And you know, no patient should be, suffering with a superficial SSI, let alone a sort of deep organ space or catastrophe like that. So there's lots of strategies that we can do to sort out, and I'm sure you're all aware of the sort of the WHO and the NICE guidelines and all that. But the beauty about SSI problems is it brings teams together. It really does. So, as I said earlier, I sort of sit on lots of different councils and things like that, and I love it because I get to meet people from different types of surgery. I get to meet nurses of different specialties. I interact with microbiologists, infectious diseases, anaesthetists, IPC, hospital management, financial directors. There's going to be one in here somewhere. And I'll get the email. Dear Mr. Bondsmith, I objected to your comment. I hope they take it well. We'll get them later. Anyway, the point is that it's about bringing a team together to solve a problem, and more there is evidence behind the problem, the solutions that we're going to give. And what we really need to be doing is thinking about sustainability. And hopefully by the end of this, not only will we have a sort of great idea about how to sort of bring a team together, how to solve the problem, how to optimize outcomes, but also what sustainability means, looks like, and can be carried forward in your own hospitals, trusts, countries. I work for only two companies, J&J, I'm an educator for them, and for BD. So I've been brought here by BD. This is the disclaimer. I'm not ashamed of it. I love BD. I think they're very friendly. But that's just what that says is, what I'm saying is me. It ain't BD. So come at me if there's a problem. Don't go at them. I think I've done that right now. Okay, now I can start talking. So, aim of this presentation, let's get into the hub of it. What are we going to talk about? So, we're going to talk about why are SSI reduction bundles important, what strategies can we implement that are sustainable, and why are they sustainable? Is there any evidence behind them, and what's the impact overall? At the end of the day, we want a solution that works. So, obviously, I'm a surgeon. I walk in here, and you guys know this topic inside out, way more than most surgeons. But ultimately, the key points that I try and get across to my surgical colleagues as to why SSIs are important. You're much more likely to end up in ITU and taking up critical care resources, which are expensive, and there's just not enough of it. So why should someone take up a valuable resource like that with a preventable problem? The mortality of a patient's operation doubles if they get an SSI. It's really, it is not about the superficial infection. It's about the deep and organ space. Think about this. I do liver and pancreatic. Let's just say I do a pancreatic cancer resection. I do that big Whipple's operation. I high-five the team at the end of the operation. We all go out thinking a great success. That operation is only a success if the patient gets their chemotherapy post-operatively within a 6-week window. We call it the optimal time to chemotherapy. If they miss that optimal time to chemotherapy, that operation is almost redundant. You could actually argue why put them through it, which is why as surgeons, believe it or not, we actually take an interest in whether someone's diabetic, immunocompromised, on steroids. Why? Because actually the recovery process is inhibited by all those problems. SSIs, you can't give chemo if you've got an SSI. You're going to miss your time to chemo. And in my HPB department, when I turned up, we had a 60 to 70% SSI rate. I mean, that's just terrible. I've got to be careful because I'm telling you this data is published. It's not a big deal. But it does look like I'm slagging off my own department, and I'm not, right? What I'm saying is that there was a problem that we had learned to just accept. And when we introduce these strategies, we are now below 30%. The published literature is 30 to 40%, right? And we're below that. So our patients are getting really good post-operative care. We've done nothing but just reduce the SSI rates. And actually, we're now seeing our longevity increasing and all that kind of stuff. Why? Because they're getting their optimal time to chemotherapy. So it's a really, really big thing. And obviously, the long-term problems are incisional hernias, which is another thing that I do, because it all forms this part. I do a great big operation. I don't want any gram-negative sepsis. I definitely don't want an SSI. And if I do, I end up with a great big hernia, which I then have to sort out. So incisional hernias, they're 50 grand. They're 100 grand to sort out. Or we could have avoided the SSI in the first place and the wound wouldn't have broken down and come with a hernia. We need to go away and explain that to the trust that you're working in. That's why they need to take SSIs more importantly. And obviously, the other thing is that an SSI, on average, and we're talking type 1, 2, 3, ABC, superficial deep organ space, however you want to classify it, call them, the average is your length of stay goes up by 6.5 days. The solution to COVID, the solution to waiting lists is get rid of the SSIs. You have less of a length of stay, you can turn the beds really quickly and get another operation or two in. So it's a big win. You know, if we get this right, look at you. You're not having the readmission rates. Why is readmission rates a problem? I'll tell you why. Because when that patient comes back in, the CCG, or what are they called now? Yeah, exactly. So those guys, if a patient's readmitted with a problem directly related to their first issue, so an operation, the cost is borne by the trust. So a readmission rate is really a big hit to trust, which is why we don't want them. So don't have an SSI, don't come back, don't trouble the GPs, don't trouble the district nurses, nurse practitioners and all that. Just get it right first time. Antimicrobial stewardship. How many times have we seen superficial infections, which actually don't need any antibiotics, being blindly prescribed by some surgical SHL reg in clinic? What you need is a course, whatever the hell that means nowadays, typically a box of antibiotics. There you go, come back. I had one team, we used to use clips, we don't use those anymore, but we had one thing where metal clips, they create little red discs in the skin, right? I had a reg for a year, at the end turned around and said, oh yeah, I just get rid of those with antibiotics. And it was like, oh God, that's my left main stem gone. You've been doing what for a year now? And then, you've got to bear in mind, I work with Lisa Butcher, right? That woman, she comes after me. So, you know, you've got to be good. And we've got to make sure that antimicrobial stewardship is not just seen as a sort of infectious diseases, microbiology, IPC. It is everybody's responsibility. When the patient's travelling around, you know, we forget, we kick them out of hospital, oh, it's just a wound, you can get daily dressings at the district practice or, you know, at the GP and stuff like that. That patient is travelling backwards and forwards. There is a carbon footprint attached with just that. The district nurse has to come out. There is time associated with that. Guess what? That's not sustainable. So sustainability is not just about saving the dolphins. It is about financial sustainability. It is about team sustainability. If you are just beasting a nurse saying, what are you doing today? Today you've got to go around 15 people and change their dressings. There's no life in that, right? So we have to come together and look at team sustainability as well as carbon footprint, environmental, and the dolphins. When we wash, we forget, don't we, that we wash and we flush all those chemicals down the sort of drain, and where do they go? And there's obviously environmental impacts related to that. There's loads that we can really get into. So what's the evidence? Let's just take a few things that we can think about that have sustainable solutions, or we can look at slightly differently, that to perhaps bring together in a sort of bundle that may reduce our SSI rates long term. I've tried to keep this really generic. So I'm obviously interested in general surgery, liver and pancreas, but this could go for orthopedics, good for plastics. And in our trust in Oxford, what we've really tried to do is to go out to each surgical department and say, right, here's the evidence for a generic bundle. And all the surgeons sort of like look at you with like evil eyes. And then you have to sort of say, right, it's up to you to bespoke it for your department, right? And actually, they come out with stuff that you're just looking at and going, cool, I get that. There's no evidence. Don't do that. So surgeons are obsessed with footfall in and out of theatre, for example. You know, that has been shown by Maria Burmeister recently, that just doesn't have an impact. So forget that. Don't worry about it. If someone wants to pop their head in and sort of say hello, you know, that you're missing the point. There are much bigger things you can do. One of the things, preoperative bathing and showering. Are we all here doing the chlorhexidine thing still? Or are we? Or are we doing soap and water? What should we be doing, do we think? Soap and water is just as good as chlorhexidine. So here's the thing. Has anybody actually tried to wash in chlorhexidine? It's a nightmare. You sort of put it in your hand. By the time you've done that, this bit's really good. But the rest of your body, I'm not going to demonstrate, but you get the picture. No one needs that. It's all in the sink, and we're giving these chlorhexidine in what? Plastic sachets. What? What are we talking about? That's not what we should be doing. Soap and water, actually, just make sure you're clean the day before, the day of surgery, is just as good as doing chlorhexidine. There are some caveats. I know if you're going to be putting in a big hip and stuff like that, sure, come at me. But by and large, and I'm talking about generically, we should be washing our patients before. Lisa, I'm going to talk about Lisa a lot because she's like my hero. But Lisa Butcher, unfortunately, had one of her members of team on my unit with appendicitis, and two things went badly. One, it took us 2 days to get that patient, her colleague, into theatre. Absolutely gutted. And two, we never once washed her. And it's just deeply, deeply embarrassing that we've got a member of the IPC team screaming out to be washed, and we just got it all wrong. But from that, it created such a sort of buzz. We now absolutely have a strict protocol that before someone comes down, they have to have demonstrated that they've at least had a wash with soap and water. That's a sustainable solution. When we're scrubbing, do we do this now? Rub, don't scrub. So we have a good wash in the morning with the surgeons. That's where if you've got dirty fingernails and all that kind of stuff, bloody hope not. But anyway, scrub up, do well, and then for subsequent cases, we just use alcohol gel. So therefore, you are saving water. The amount of water that we pour down a drain just by having the taps turned on, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And I honestly don't think that that's the way forwards. So water sustainability, that is a big, big thing. Can we please look at, for the first case, I get it, do a big scrub, that's absolutely fine. But then after that, alcohol gels to come at me. Now you're going to turn around and say, but alcohol gels aren't sustainable. And I'm going to say, yeah, I know. But they break down really, really into safe products in the water, and the aim here is to conserve water. That's what we're trying to do. That's why I'm saying it's a sort of sustainable solution. Hair removal. Some of you, I keep saying the word shave, not clip. And every time I say, oh, so anyway, take the patient and shave. And I hear this great big intake of breath, and I know I've said it. Normally, Lisa's in the audience screaming at me, no. Well, the other day, Lisa and I were giving a talk together, and she said shave. And I got right in there and went, oh, Lisa Butcher, how dare you? All about clipping. We never shave, right? And actually, even now, surgeons talk a great game, but they don't do it. I've just taken on a new surgeon with us, and what was the first thing? We clipped the junior clipped the patient well outside of the anaesthetic room, but hadn't quite gone low enough. And the surgeon said, without blinking, give me a knife. I mean, can you imagine that? I haven't seen that done for like 10, 15 years in my department, but it was so second nature to him. Clearly, the hospital that he came from, that was a standard thing to do. So we don't do it. We clip the patient, and ideally we clip them out of theatre. So I tell a great story where we took one of my sort of consultant colleagues who well, basically has got slightly less hair than a gorilla. And we put him on the... He's this is being filmed. He's going to know it's about him. I don't care. So we put him on the table. We covered him in iodine paint, fluorescent UV paint, and let that dry. Put him on the table in the operating theatre. Turn the UV lights on, and then we just clipped him. And that was it. And the idea was we wanted to try and demonstrate, see if we could visually see what debris came off of him in the theatre, and where did it go and what happened. And we thought, I don't know what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, there's going to be some kerfuffle, and then it's going to settle down, it's going to be fine, right? So after about 3 hours, it looked like a nuclear rainstorm was still coming down. The absolute debris that was just being floated around. And the worst thing is, obviously, there's me and a few colleagues that sat there filming, getting bored to tears as we're just watching this stuff constantly falling down. Every time we moved, it just started the whole thing. You got all these eddies coming up. And it looked like some sort of weird nightclub where you had these sort of whirlwinds of stuff coming up. So as soon as we saw that, we said, we're going to clip outside. Now, in my hospital, we have anaesthetic rooms. I know they're not everywhere, but guess what the anaesthetist turned around and said? You ain't clipping a patient in my anaesthetic room. You'll make it dirty. All right, but that's all right. We'll do it in theatre where we're going to open the patient, put a joint, come on. So then we moved up. Anyway, the anaesthetist, when we showed them that video, they were quite happy to let us clip in the anaesthetic room. But really what we like to do is when the patient's up on the ward now, we try and say, right, there's a little checklist just to make sure that the porters and the nurses, when they hand over, patients been washed with soap and water and they've been clipped as close to theatre as possible. Because what you don't want is you don't want people clipping the day before. And you definitely don't want the patients shaving. That's really bad. But ultimately, we're even trying to go one step further, where even if they are a gorilla, you just try not to clip them at all, right? So or just minimize the amount that you're clipping. So just down right where the cut is. Neurosurgeons don't necessarily shave their head anymore, right? So we can do it without. And we use this device. And we try, as I said, try and do it outside of theatre. But actually, there's the vacuum cleaner that sucks up everything off the back. Come on. Isn't that, what a great little idea there, that someone just spotted that all this debris is going everywhere. No. If you've got that, you can do this in theatre, which then takes you that one step that you are clipping, if you have to, as close to the time of knife to skin as possible. So there's some solutions there that we are trying to minimize the amount of debris within theatre. Antibiotics. So correct antibiotics, correct time, we all know that. But what I really want to put here is, can we please challenge the surgeon to do no antibiotics post-operatively? Look at, there's a lot of people there going, I'll try it, but I'm going to need a drink first. So put it this way. If you're taking out an infected problem, you have got that problem out. The person's got an innate immune system, by and large, that's going to work. So, for example, for appendicitis, we give the antibiotics up to the point of knife to skin because we're treating the antibiotics until we get formal source control. As soon as the appendix is in the bucket, that's it. There's no post-op antibiotics. There's none of this, oh, I'm just going to give 1 dose, 2 doses, 3. What does that mean? So what we say is if you're going to give antibiotics afterwards, so now let's just take it, let's upscale it. Let's just say perforated colon, fecal peritonitis, there's poo everywhere. You've done a big Hartmann's operation, you want to give antibiotics. What we say is you give 72 hours. And at 72 hours, you then review whether you're going to move on or stop. And we've adopted that approach for well over a year, and we have not seen any increase in adverse events. So we've not seen an increase in abscesses, we've not seen an increase in readmission rates, we've not seen an increase in wound infection problems, nothing. And yet our antibiotic prescribing has tanked, absolutely tanked. And it's about educating the people as well. You know, the patients, they often come in and say, you know, oh, I better have some antibiotics, give me the strong ones. No. Skin prep. Remember this. Skin prep is been looked at a lot. So, alcohol is better than aqueous for skin prep. Chlorhexidine is better than betadine, povoiodine, for skin prep. 2% is better than 5% for alcoholic chlorhexidine. So we're looking for 2% alcohol chlorhexidine as a skin prep. And everybody looks at those great big pink bottles, which now have on the back of that, and go and have a look at it, says not licensed for skin prep. So we should not be doing that. And here's the reason we should not be using those great big pink bottles. A, you're going to be using 1 per person. 2, we've grown stuff from around those lids, as I'm sure people in the room have. But when you pour that into your plastic galley pot, when you take your 2 Rampleys with 2 swabs, which you're going to then use to coat the patient, when you have to re-sterilize using all the chemicals and material and energy to ensure that those 2 Rampleys come back for the next time, that is a really, really bad footprint in theatre. And as part of the Green Initiative, we were trying to absolutely stamp that out. And this device, which is ChloraPrep, there's 2 things that we liked about this. 1, the amount of plastic in it is less than the plastic that you would use if you were doing a standard procedure. 2, this is safe. So how many times have you seen the SHO thinking that they're king of the hill, throwing, you know, oh yeah, I know I'm not going to do any part of this operation, but I may as well look good at the beginning. And they're there painting away. You get that pooling of the alcoholic chlorhexidine behind the patient, and that's where risk of fire occurs. And every year, tragically, we do hear about fires in theatre. And it can all be avoided if we use devices like this, where it is virtually impossible. I mean, I have really, really tried to use a device like that and get runoff round the back of the patient. You can't do it. The sponge is too well designed to allow direct impregnation of the 2% chlorhexidine into the skin without allowing the runoff. I know you can get it uncolored, but we like the colored so you can actually see where it is. And we think it's a great device on delivery, safety, and sustainability, because the plastic in it is less than the total plastic behind. And it's not going to be a million sort of years away before actually that handle and the delivery device will be a renewable source. Normothermia. We were terrible at this. When we did my original research looking into normothermia in Oxford, we were 0 not a single patient out of 100 and whatever it was, 125 patients, not a single one was 36 degrees or above at the time of knife to skin. So now we spend a lot of time making sure that the patient is warm before they come down. It is so difficult. Once they drop below 36, to try and get the patient up, it's really difficult. So we've got to think about normothermia and the way to do it. Do you need expensive warming bear hugger devices and all that, or do you just need extra blankets? You know, there is a lot of mileage in making sure the patient is warm on the ward, wrapped in blankets, kept warm during the device, and brought down well. Very briefly, normoglycemia. I know we have to talk about this a little bit because the anaesthetists don't like normoglycemia as we would describe it. We are looking for a range of between 6 and 8 millimoles per litre, even in non-diabetics. So if your blood glucose level goes higher, which it often does as a result of operation stress, the anaesthetist should be, in effect, starting up a sliding scale to bring that down. Loads of evidence for this. But the anaesthetists don't like it because they worry about driving the patient hypo. So what they want is lots of sampling. And what I would recommend is something like this, which is a sort of AI device. We've got our own one coming, but it doesn't look like this. It's much better. No, but this device, which is out on the market, what it allows you to do is it constantly samples the patient's capillary blood glucose, sends it to the anaesthetist's phone so that they can get a trend, so that one spike of 10, they can see a minute later, oh, it was just a spike, it's actually back down to 8. And they get a much quicker and fluid management of the blood glucose level throughout the operation, before, during, and after, up to 48 hours after the operation. Really, really hard to do. You've got to find friendly anaesthetists to buy into that. Lots of tears, blood, sweat to get that across the line, but we did it. And then we've moved to these triclosan antibacterial impregnated sutures for all our wounds. Here's a thing, and this is hot off the press. In our HPB surgery, in pancreatic surgery, we do lots of anastomoses. And the last big success in pancreatic surgery in reducing leaks was just the way that we make the joins. That's what you need. It was just a really good thing that someone came up and said, oh, we should do it this way and not that. And we got a 5% reduction in anastomotic leaks. Why is that important? Because that's type C, isn't it? That's your type C SSI, reduced by 5% just by doing an alternative join. When we've introduced these sutures, we can't believe it. We've used them intra-abdominally throughout the operations, and we've seen a 20% reduction in our anastomotic leak rate. Like, we can't publish that. We're having to get it independently validated because we don't want to look like idiots, because people are going to turn around and say, nothing does that, right? But there is something here about having triclosan within the sutures that stops the biofilm from forming. And as we know, anastomotic leaks are either because someone can't sew together, that's rare nowadays, or it's actually that biofilm is forming around the suture, creating effectively an SSI in the anastomosis, and that's causing the leak. So if we can stop that at source, that's great. That's your type C. Why is that important? For open colorectal surgery, type B and C operation, SSIs, are about $100,000. That's the cost of a B and C in a colorectal. We published that alongside Prof. Leeper and stuff recently. Hysterectomy wounds, $65,000. These are big problems. So again, if we get it right, financially, we're sustainable. So, we want to look at that. So then, if we take all these, all these evidence points, and they are evidence-based, all of them. If we put them all together and stick them in a bundle, does it work? Well, where is he? There he is, my mate, David Leeper, Prof. Leeper, Charles Edmondson. They looked at this a little while ago, but look at that, 8,500 patients, and they said, yeah, if you put things into a bundle, evidence-based bundle, it works. So now, when we go to the surgeon, when we go to the trust, when we go to our sort of SSI surveillance group and all that, we've got a solution. We can make it 8 points. That's all we're asking for. Look how generic. Tell me the operation that can't be done on. Can be done on anything. I would, if I'm honest, drop that. That one is, that glycemic control is so angry. It's so difficult to get along. And then, at the end of the day, and what's really important here, is that you have never told the surgeon how to do their operation. So you're not even in conflict with the surgeon. What you're saying to the surgeon is, hey, guess what? I'm going to halve your rate of SSIs just by implementing this bundle. And the results are extraordinary. And I've deliberately tried to not bore you with all the facts and the figures, but just, I'm telling you, the reduction in SSI rates, we went from 60 to 70% down to less than 30% now in our HPB department. In every single department that we've gone into, the surgeons generally have not known their own SSI rate. The reason I say generally is because cardiothoracics, for some reason, seem to be absolutely nails at monitoring their SSI rates. They're relatively rare, but when they happen in that midline stenotomy, good God, that's catastrophic. So they take a real interest in it. So they're a special group. Obs and gynae, no clue. They just don't. They really don't. And when you go in, you get them to try and say, well, what is it? And then you audit for a month, 2 months is what we suggest. Come back, you've got their real-time data. It is typically double what they think. It is typically double what the literature posts. So I went into my acute surgery department, which I head up, and I said, right, every single open, dirty laparotomy, we're going to follow up now for a minimum of 30 days, and we're going to see what our SSI rate is. And it was 40%, right? So I said, cool, we're going to halve it. And everyone said, it can't be done. They come in, they're cold, they've got sepsis, they're often unwell, there's fecal contamination everywhere. I said, don't worry. We put that 8-point bundle in. Literally, that bundle. That's exactly what we put in. And 1 year later, our SSI rate is 4%. We went from 40 to 4, so long as all of those bits are kept. Do you know how much that has reduced our length of stay? But over 2 days, we've reduced our length of stay in our unit just by implementing that. Now let's go back, because financial sustainability is a big thing here, as well as environmental sustainability. Let's look at the cost. Well, we're doing that anyway. We're doing that anyway. We're doing that anyway. We're just going to move from a pink bottle, blah, 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 to a ChloraPrep bottle. Forget that, that's difficult. And then we're just going to close in layers. There's no cost to the trust here, yet guess what? That chief exec is going to absolutely love it, because they'll be running off to the NHS saying, we're greener than you can believe it. We got a massive reduction in length of stay. The significant cost savings. We've saved millions of pounds in our trust now. And then we've got a sustainable solution. So when we looked at just the HPB department I was in, because we reduced from 60 to 70% down to below 30%, we used a very simple algorithm to work out what that carbon footprint looked like for the year. And we have saved 185 return flights to Rome. I don't know why they picked Rome, but it's there. But 185 return flights, that's a big footprint, right? Just for what? For just applying something that we all know works. And now, the worst bit of the world, surveillance. This is, so everybody, and I get, and I appreciate we're sort of, I'm desperately running out of time. Everyone says, okay, great, but how can we ensure that this is followed up, carried on? How do we know we're amazing for the next 1, 5, 10 years? Because I tell you what, no one in this room has the time or team to follow every surgical patient up for what? 30 days? 90 days? 1 year? What is it? Well, I'll tell you now, we always thought it was 30 days. If they've got an implant, it's up to 1 year, right? A third of SSIs occur after 30 days. So 30 days isn't necessarily good enough. So what's the solution? You've got to put the solution into the hands of the patient. Who's going to take the best care of that wound? Damn straight it's going to be the patient. Who cares most about that wound? It's the patient, right? So if you can put a digital solution into the hands of the patient with their smartphone, they're going to lap it up. And remember this, we follow up a lot of patients totally unnecessarily because 7 out of 10 patients don't need follow-up. So that's 70% of your patients don't need to drive in, block up the car park, drive home again. Again, that's a carbon footprint that we're trying to reduce. Effectively, this digital solution, it's a really simple app where it gets downloaded onto the patient's phone. The patient can take a picture if they're worried about their wound, and it comes into a healthcare professional. There's a lot that can be said about this app. It really is a solid piece of digital innovation to ensure that the patients don't have to keep coming back. It's a sustainable solution. You're not handing them paper. You're not handing them loads of information. It's all on a digital app. And if you come up to the BD desk, there's loads of demonstrations and information that we can give you there. But just to show it by numbers, I think this is a really big thing that you should be throwing at your trusts. Lots of people and I said it in my last talk, lots of people say, I keep talking about the money. But at the end of the day, nothing seems to change in the NHS unless you can demonstrate a cost saving. So I talk about financial savings all the time because if we don't bring that up front, no one seems to listen. We all sit here as healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, we're all here for the patient. We're here for clinical excellence. We're here for the best outcomes. So why don't people listen? Well, because they always have to balance the books. So we've got to go back to them and meet them halfway. We've got a really fantastic solution to reducing SSIs, ticks lots of different levels. But by the way, Chief Exec, you'll be having champagne at Christmas because I've saved you so much money. So in conclusion, evidence-based SSI reduction strategies can be implemented in an evidence-based manner to ensure a sustainable solution across multiple platforms, not just the dolphins and the carbon footprint, the environment, financially sustainability, team sustainability, resource sustainability. I really, really hope that you're sort of going to go away, find that surgeon and say, oi, Bond Smith said. And then I put my details up here because myself, Lisa Butcher, we love to travel around, come and speak to anybody and anywhere in the hospitals. There are very, very few problems that you will encounter that I have not had to deal with personally. So just email me. It's there. We'll come and talk. This looks daunting. There's a whole implementation. Oh my God, where do I start? Doesn't matter. We'll come. We'll tell you. We got you. It's going to be okay. But the bottom line is evidence and sustainability. Thanks very much.